Okay, now we are officially recording. All right, so welcome to Office Hours, everybody. Today is April 22nd, so it's about a week or so after DrupalCon North America 2021, when Dries gave his Driesnote. So rather than just playing the Driesnote during office hours, I thought it might be more interesting just to go through his slides. And there's a lot of slides here, so we're not going to you know stop on every single one of them, but we'll hit all the high points, I think, and just talk about them. And folks have questions. I know not everybody was able to be there for it, able to watch it. So I figured we'd just go through it and talk as we go. So away we go. Dries. Okay, so he talked basically about Drupal 9 and Drupal 10, and then something called falling in love with Drupal and getting off the island. So that's the main three topics. So he talked a little bit about how, 3 of the 4 major companies producing the COVID-19 vaccine actually use Drupal. I know Pfizer and J&J use it extensively, I can tell you that. He talked about Empire State Building. Their new tour uses Drupal. A bunch of other sites. Pac-12, which is a big, college sports league here in the U.S., migrated from 8 to 9 pretty seamlessly. And then he always pulls out really good stats. He's got a really good researcher. But it took 7 months to get 60,000 sites up and running on Drupal 7 after Drupal 7 was released. It took 3 months to get 60,000 sites on Drupal 8, and it took a month to get 60,000 sites on Drupal 9. So that's, that has a lot to do with the much easier upgrade process. This is another, so I'm going to skip all these. I'm going to go right to this. So this is talking about contributed modules. So he talked about how a year and a half after Drupal 8 came out, only about, I think it was a third. Yeah, only about a third of contrib modules were ready. This is a year and a half after Drupal 8 came out. Only about a third of contributed modules were ready. Of the top 50 were ready for Drupal 8. 10 months after the Drupal 9 release, 90% of the top 50 modules are ready for Drupal 9. And that, again, just, it's a much gentler upgrade path from 8 to 9 than it was from 7 to 8. And there's just some more stats that back that up, that basically just show that, the plan of having these easier updates between major versions of Drupal is definitely working. All right, so then we start talking about Drupal 10, which unbelievably is next year. So he always talks about, like, what are the big initiatives that folks are working on in the community for the next major version of Drupal. So this is kind of that section of that. So you talked about 5 initiatives for Drupal 10. Okay, so first one was decoupled menus. So the idea behind decoupled menus was we've had some fits and starts in the community about using like React or Angular, putting something like that into core, or making, or picking one of those to be like the official way to, use JavaScript front end. But we never really made a whole lot of progress since it was such a huge problem. So for Drupal 10, the community decided to take a different tack. And that tack was, rather than trying to do this for everything, let's just focus on one thing. And so the idea was, what would we need to do in order to provide a best-in-class decoupled menu system for Drupal? And these are just the menus that we all, know and love, structure menus, all those. But rather than having them rendered from the server every time, what if we, just provided them to a front-end JavaScript framework as a JSON file, and then had those menus rendered on the client side, and they can be more responsive and stuff like that. So again, it's a pretty big task, but it's something that we can, as a community, can wrap our arms around a little bit more. So there's a lot of parts of that have been done. There's still some work that needs to be done. A lot of the work involves, like, not big changes to Drupal core, but little tweaks to Drupal core to make, something like this easier to do and more robust. think about menus are, on one hand, they're fairly simple. I always call them a bucket of links. But keep in mind, menus also have to do a lot with authentication, with user roles. Someone who's an admin is going to see different menus than someone who's an anonymous user, and you'll have to be able to handle all that on the, on the front end side of that as well. So this is part exploratory, part real of just figuring out what it's going to take and then implementing like best in the industry decoupled menu solution. So all week, last week, each day had a different focus. So for a different initiative. So there was a day that focused on decoupled menus, and that was last Tuesday. Second one, easy out of the box. Amy June, you want to talk about this one? Are you still there?
Sure, I'll talk about it.
All right.
So easy out of the box. Dries introduced, I think, well, didn't introduce, but talked about it a lot at last year's Driesnote. And the idea of it is when people get to the download, they've downloaded it and they open it up, they want the experience to be really nice. They want it to be clean. They want it to be intuitive. And then kind of the second part of it is they want the editorial experience to be wonderful. And so that includes like making sure that media is cleaned up, that layout builder, it's stable, but it definitely needs some work along with some of the like contributed projects around layout builder, like layout builder library and block restrictions and things like that. And then the part that we really want to clean up is Claro, because Claro is going to be the new admin theme, because we just sort of want a cleaner, brighter, more intuitive interface for the content experience. And part of that is like making sure that it's accessible, making sure that more accessible, and just the user experience is completely clean. Because we want people to open up Drupal, understand how to use it, and want to stay with it. We don't want them to have to fiddle around and play with it and take 6 hours to get accustomed to it and like it. We want it to be more like the Wix and the WordPress experience, that people can open it up and just know what to do. And right now, that doesn't exactly happen. So the main focus is getting Claro stable and making sure that we have a lot of input from editors and a lot of input from new users on the experience, because that's who it's for. So as much as we like our experienced developers to work on it, we really need the input from everybody to make it, because everyone uses Drupal a little different. So everyone's input is really appreciated with this project.
Cool. Yeah, so Amy June is involved in this initiative, if you didn't figure that out already. And is it fair to say like easy out of the box is mainly aimed at authors?
Yes. It's for content editors for sure. Like it's the content experience that we're really looking to improve.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Number 3 was automated updates. So this one's pretty cool because this is basically the idea that, one of the pain points for a lot of folks moving from Drupal 7 to Drupal 8 was Composer, and having to use Composer to update modules and manage your code base. So the idea behind automated updates is to provide an interface from the admin area where you can add modules. But then behind the scenes, have those modules added using Composer in a secure manner, and just all around, just make it possible that folks don't, folks can have Drupal sites, but not have to learn Composer and Git. If all they need to do is install some modules and keep modules updated. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of security necessary around this, and a lot of there's this whole readiness check thing, which I know that, they've been working on. When you hit a button and say you want to update, there's a lot of checks you have to make sure on that site before you do. If you're doing it, especially in an automated way, make sure there's, number one, enough disk space, right? Make sure the module hasn't been hacked or changed. And then once you download, once that process downloads the updated module, make sure there wasn't a man in the middle of an attack. So that's like the signature verification. So there's actually, I forget what TUF stands for. It's an acronym, but I think it's for the, I think it's PHP community. It might be a larger than PHP community, but there's kind of like an industry standard way of doing this type of thing that we are leveraging, or that we're trying to leverage in order to make this happen. So it's really interesting. I think it'll be great, and it'll be host dependent. I think the host will have to choose to allow it. But again, this kind of goes back to the easy out of the box one, so that we can better, position Drupal to challenge kind of the, I don't want to say the lower end of the market, but, sites that are normally go to Wix or WordPress or, what's the other one? It's like Wix. I can't think of it right now, but anyway, the goal is to try and get it into core at some point before Drupal 10, which means realistically it would have to be finished sometime this calendar year. The update framework and Squarespace. Thank you, Amy June. Squarespace is what I was thinking about, and TUF stands for the update framework. And I know some people involved in this one. So if anyone's interested in getting involved in any of these, just well, obviously go to Amy June directly. Cut me out of the I don't need to be the middleman if you're interested in this. I do know folks involved with decoupled menus, and I do know folks involved with automated updates. So if you're interested in participating or just learning more, just let me know and I'll introduce you. Number 4, Drupal 10 readiness, which is kind of a scary one, right? Because not everyone's even on Drupal 9 yet. Like the pace of Drupal core development has just like it's like we're all drinking Red Bull all of a sudden after the slog to go from Drupal 7 to Drupal 8. It's like every 2 years now we're getting major versions of Drupal, which is, it's great. And as a community, we're getting used to it. So basically, this initiative is all about, number one, identifying and removing APIs that need to be deprecated or that have been deprecated, but then also making sure that Drupal itself is compatible with, the newest version of PHP, the newest version or pretty new version of Symfony, the latest version of Composer, this upgrade status tool that was I think it was around beforehand, but it really came to its own for Drupal 9, that basically you can install on your site and it will tell you, look, these 4 modules are ready for Drupal 9, but these 2 modules are not. So as of right now, Drupal is good to go with all this stuff, but by the time the Drupal 10 release date comes around, there's going to be a new version of Symfony. So if possible, we want Drupal 10 to be compatible, not be compatible, but work with Symfony 6. And there's a big update to CK Editor coming that will be released before Drupal 10. So we want to try and get ahead of that curve and see if we can't make Drupal 10 compatible with this new version, this future version of CK Editor. And then the other goal is removing as much of jQuery and jQuery UI code from Drupal core. So I think jQuery UI is doable to get that all out of Drupal core by Drupal 10. I'm not sure about jQuery. It's not listed here, so I guess that's a stretch goal, perhaps. But right now there is a lot of effort on this new version of CK Editor because I think that's going to mean a lot of internal, not a lot, but a significant number of internal changes for Drupal in order to make that experience smooth. Hey, Micah, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. And Sarah, hi Sarah, how are you? All right, so we are just going through the Driesnote slides one by one. So new front end theme, Aloe Vera. So anyone who's downloaded Drupal 9 has, has probably seen it at least on your parents' page, and you can enable it and check it out. As of right now, it's in core as experimental or beta. The goal is to basically, for Drupal 10, have Aloe Vera as the default theme. So when you install, the standard profile for Drupal 10, you won't see Bardic, you'll see Aloe Vera, which is it's a much more modern, and I think already it's fair to say it's more accessible, but we want it to be, I don't know, Amy June, do you know what guidelines are they aiming for, like AAA for accessibility?
Somewhere in between double and triple.
Okay, so they're aiming for a very high level of accessibility according to WCAG guidelines. So this one, I don't, this is probably the one with the least amount of work ahead of it, but there is still, the more people that test it, the more people that provide feedback. And I know they're definitely looking for folks who know HTML, CSS really well. And accessibility, obviously.
And they're looking for people to build tests too.
Oh, okay. So what kind of tests? Like, could you write, like, is there such a thing as like an automated accessibility test?
No, more of the core testing, like Night Watch and things like that.
Oh, okay. So Night Watch is basically the JavaScript, front-end JavaScript testing. All right.
We have requirements for the 508 compliance.
Yeah. Yeah, so usually it's just a matter of figuring out what level of that is required for a particular organization. Either A, single A, double A, or triple A. All right, so those are the 5 big initiatives and Dries made a really good point of saying, even though Drupal 10 is not till next year, realistically, because there's going to be like a beta release cycle and a release candidate release cycle, and those things take time. Realistically, for stuff to get into Drupal 10, it needs to be done the end of this calendar year, so that we have time to fix bugs and stuff like that before Drupal 10 is released. Okay, yeah, so about 6 months remaining if you want to get something new into Drupal 10. So I think it's longer than 6. Well, it's talking about, yeah, that doesn't jive, because 9.3 is aiming for December, but then there's also going to be 9.4 and 10. So I'm not sure how this jives with this.
Yeah, but doesn't that have to do something with the timeline about you can get it in, but then you have to get it to a certain stable point and stuff?
Well, that's what all this,
for all
that's
that
the
to happen?
February to June timeframe. So like 10.0 deadline he has is like mid-February here. So let's just, I most often hear the end of the calendar year. So this, and the graph kind of jives with that. So let's just go with that for now. Planned dates. Okay, that's pretty much the same. Key dates for Drupal 7 and 8. So 4th quarter of next year is end of support for Drupal 7. Surprisingly, end of support for Drupal 8 is this year. So luckily, it's not that big. It's not as much of a heavy lift to get stuff upgraded for from Drupal 8 to Drupal 9. So hopefully this is not too big of a hurdle for most sites to reach. And then this will be the interesting one, because there's so many sites on Drupal 7 that the community will stop officially supporting it, 4th quarter of 2022. But just like there are, I know My Drop Wizard is one of them. It's a company that basically provides support, extended support for even Drupal 6 sites. And I'm sure the same thing, that they'll have the same offering for Drupal 7 sites well into the future. And I actually know for a fact that My Drop Wizard, on the same day that yesterday, when the Drupal core update was announced, the security update, my drop wizard had the Drupal 6 update ready to go at the same time. So there's very little lag for most of those security updates. So it's not the end of the world if your site isn't migrated by Q4 of 2022, up to Drupal 9. It just means you probably have to pay a little bit of money to keep it secure until you are ready. All right, Drupal 10. Okay, thank you. Okay, all right. So he talked a bit about, falling in love with Drupal, about, what could we be doing as a community to make, the first time someone uses Drupal a better experience. I think that's a fair way of saying it. Feel free to interrupt me if you get a different interpretation. So he did Dries does a couple surveys a year. So here's, kind of a abstract way of looking at some of the results for what's the most important strength of Drupal. My answer would have been architecture, I think. Yeah, I would have said information architecture, but I'll take this architecture one right there. That's mine. But he wants it to, he wants it to be crystal clear. He wants it to be, not where you have to learn to love Drupal, as kind of the situation we are now, to some extent. But once you see it and you spend a day with it, you fall in love with it. And honestly, that's, when I first got into Drupal 4.6, 4.7, I had been, browsing for different open source content management systems. And it wasn't more than a day or two of me using Drupal before I realized that, okay, this is the one that I want to use. And we've gotten away from that a little bit. So he talked about this guy, the CEO of Microsoft, how he, when he took over from Microsoft, he brought Microsoft back to basics. And I don't know if he has a quote. Yeah, I don't know. Oh, yeah, here's the quote right here. So his quote is, "We build technology so that others can build more technology." And so this was basically his mission statement for Microsoft when he took over. And that's when they really started focusing on serving, developers and serving others to build more technology. And that's, the whole Azure cloud platform. That's where that was born out of. They acquired GitHub. I think, just the fact that VS Code, Visual Studio 20 years ago was a beast. It's been completely reinvented, and it is on par at least with PHP Storm, which has been an entrenched, kind of go-to IDE for PHP folks for a long time. They're really doing a great job. And so Dries was kind of making that comparison of like, what would that mean for Drupal? So, he did the survey, and, this is, I agreed with this completely when this slide came up. It's all about empowering site builders, not necessarily coders, but folks who can snap together a site with core and a bunch of modules easily and make something very powerful out of it. So it will skip these with as little code as possible. So yeah, so the journey of many Drupalists starts with, and I can, that goes for me. Oh, look, Amy June. Hey, look, it's Erin Winborn Award winner Amy June Heinlein right there.
Wait, I don't think Sarah and whoever came in late saw this.
Oh, make sure you put that up on yeah.
Here you go.
Sarah and Micah, please acknowledge. Amy June has made us all verbally acknowledge that we've seen that.
Can you see this?
Congratulations.
Sarah, I'm waiting for your affirmation.
Hey, I'll wait here all day. Is she still here? Oh no, Sarah left. I'd rather leave Amy June than provide affirmation. Here, let me get her back and let me make sure she comes back. Sarah, we need you back in office hours immediately. Make it sound really serious.
You might have to offer a gold star for that.
No, I think she'll just show up. Okay. Look, why is your picture getting bigger?
Because he talks about me during the Driesnote. He didn't
Oh,
even
I
know
must have blacked out during that.
he didn't even know I was going to win the award, and then he like texted me a few days ahead of time and asked me all these questions because he wanted to share my story during the Dries.
Oh, right. Yes, I do remember that. Yes. All right. Yeah.
You know, from my humble beginnings.
Humble. Yes. All right. Moving on until Sarah gets here. Then we'll have to take another pause. So a lot of talk about site builders. And, I'll give credit to Dries, and I'll criticize him when I disagree with him, but I'll also give him credit. And this was not probably an easy thing to do. And a lot of people probably, didn't want to hear this, even though it's true. But, bringing Drupal 7, to Drupal 8 added a lot of complexity and to the, and it probably hurt market, it definitely hurt market share. We have a much better code base. There's no doubt about that, but it's a lot more complex to use. So I think this feels like a course correction a little bit. So modernization efforts added complexity, which disadvantaged the site builder. Completely fair statement. So he's a big proponent now of improving the site builder experience because he thinks that will make Drupal better overall. He wants people to be able to build ambitious sites with low code, which is this is all very similar to like a lot of the reasons why folks like me got into Drupal 10, 15 years ago. So he went through this whole thing. This was probably a good 15, 20 minutes of the Driesnote and I'm going to skip through past, I'm going to skip past a lot of this, but he talked about, what does it take to install a module? Actually, no. Well, he did talk about this a little bit. There's another section, which I'm thinking of that was a lot longer. This is what should happen, but this is what actually happens, which clearly sucks. So let's not sugarcoat it, right? So I love it, first sight. That's get it? Site, S-I-G-H. So what he wants to do is he wants there to be a new initiative that basically, and I always forget what he calls a project browser. He wants the community to build a project browser like this that's built into Drupal. So like when you install Drupal 10 or Drupal 11, you will actually get this type of project browser, which looks like an app store, right? Which allows you to, there can be a curated list of modules. You can search for modules. There could be some sort of ranking or some sort of filtering and browsing. And then if you find a module you like, you just have to, and obviously he took a screenshot of like the app store on a Mac and stuck some Drupal stuff over it. But you should be able to hit a button and get that thing installed. So clearly this is kind of, in my opinion, the next step from the automatic updates. It will leverage all of that code, secure downloads, installing, without having to know Composer. So he feels that this could be a really big and important step in kind of not backtracking, but course correcting a little bit and making it a lot easier for site builders, to not have to know Git or Composer. So we talked about that a bunch. We talked about compare with, iPhone. He talked about how Squarespace, Wix, WordPress, they all have these. They all have something like this. So this is not a chance to leap ahead. This is a nice way of saying that we're behind. Table stakes basically means if you want to be in the game, you have to, this is like your ante, you have to ante up. So if you want to be in the game, you need one of these, and we don't have one, so we are behind. He talks about the web form module, how it does have something like this, but it's more of just links and stuff. He talks about why he feels it's important. It ties to automated updates. So he feels step one is to have a big initiative to build this project browser. So he wanted to kick that off at this DrupalCon. Find people who are interested in participating in this initiative, formalize a team, and build something for Contrib. So he yeah, I'll put this I'll put this in the chat, the Zoom chat, if anybody wants to click on that. But as with most things in core, they need to start in Contrib and do all of the hard work in there, the iterations and the design, and just figuring stuff out in there. And then once it's mature enough, and once we think it's ready, then bring it into core. Dries is actually going to temporarily lead this team, which I think this is the first time he's done anything like this in a long time. So he must be very high on this. I think at some point, once there's like a leadership team for the initiative in place, he'll step back. But I think he's very high on this right now. And then step two, and he didn't talk about this nearly as much as he talked about the project browser, but just improve the user experience of, for those of you, well, we've all taken the DCO here. These are some of the tenets of the DCO, right? But just improve the user experience, or I would argue it almost be like the SBX, the site builder experience for this, rather than the end user experience. But I know that a few years ago at one of the Driesnotes, Dries was talking about, wouldn't it be great if you could build content types with drag and drop? Drag a content type, drag some fields onto that content type, and then drag a relationship between one field to another field in a different entity. That's like a reference field. What if you could do all that visually, right? I think that's the stuff he's kind of talking about there. So he just wants to remind us all that, of site builders, and that there's a lot of folks who were site builders or are site builders who don't use, well, let's say fell out of love with Drupal. So Dries likes to set big goals. So this is basically the attempt to energize the community to build something that could beat the Wix and the Squarespace at their own game. All right, so third topic, getting off the island. So this was funny in a very sad way. So the Drupal community, all this stuff is true. There are, I don't even know if there's any other open source communities that have as many core developers. I know that, definitely the number of core developers in WordPress is in the maybe hundreds. Amy June, I don't know, or anybody who knows WordPress more than I do, but it's definitely not in the thousands.
I don't even know if it's in the hundreds.
Right. Okay. Yeah, it's not big. Linux, it takes a while. There's a lot of contributors to Linux, but again, that's a pretty high bar to get a commit into the Linux kernel. So I'm not sure what other communities are the size of Drupal that have and if we just look at one metric, the number of folks to the core product, the number of people who contribute to the core product, I'm not sure if anyone's bigger than Drupal. And we've done things in our community that nobody else has done. The contribution credit system, where we can credit individuals, where individuals get credit, but they can also credit organizations who sponsor those individuals. I don't know of any other open source communities who do that yet. So we've got a lot of, best of breed type of contribution tools in our community. But the problem is, for the longest time, we built a lot of our own stuff. Look at Drupal.org, like the project issue queue, and like our project, our packaging. So like when a module maintainer says, okay, time for a new release, they hit a button, then Drupal.org has this black box in the background that does something and creates a zip file or a tar.gz file, and also somehow makes it available on the Drupal packages, but it's all kind of custom stuff. But the problem with custom stuff is, folks who grew up using, and contributing to other open source projects on GitLab and GitHub, they come to Drupal.org and they're like, well, what the hell is this? You know, it's very different. And so, so a couple of years ago, we started modernizing how we contribute code. And so Drupal.org actually uses GitHub in the back end for a lot of stuff now. And it's really written by these 4 folks, and really just super smart folks. And yeah, obviously there's some community volunteers as well. He went through this whole, actually Matthew did. He recorded himself contributing. Let's see if I can find it. Where did he do it? Maybe he did it somewhere in here. Maybe he doesn't have a slide for it. But Matthew recorded himself contributing a patch to Symfony without ever having contributed a patch from Symfony before. So he found a bug in, I think, Symfony console or something he wanted to change in Symfony console. And he basically went through the steps of doing that. And, you know, what the automate, you know, he'd go to, I think it was on GitHub, and he tried to fork and submit a pull request, but then there's a very nice automated message that, hey, it looks like you're trying to do this, but this is the wrong place, so go here. And he was like automatically directed almost at every step of the way about how to contribute. And it was all through the web browser. It was all on GitHub, and it wasn't actually that many steps. And it was actually a very interesting, you know, just a journey that he took in order to get his patch accepted for Symfony. He then did the same thing for Drupal, and it was a hot mess. It was funny because it was so sad. And just the number of things he had to learn, the number of steps he had to take, the number of Drupalisms he had to learn was embarrassing. So that's what this problem is. You know, how can we make contributing easier? And a lot of this comes down to modernizing our tooling. So what Dries talked about here a lot was, you know, we're already using GitLab with a half step. But there's still a bunch of Drupalisms in there. So Dries is basically talking about enough with the half steps. We need to completely adopt GitLab as the way to contribute to Drupal core. And that's some big changes, because that means saying goodbye to like our traditional Drupal.org issue queues, you know, in lieu of GitLab issue queues, which theoretically should not be that big of a deal, because most folks who contribute to Drupal also are very comfortable with GitLab or GitHub. And all this is really going to do is just make it easier for folks to contribute back to Drupal, you know, while maintaining, you know, the stuff that, you know, makes our community so strong. So Tim, who's the CTO, Chief Technical Officer of the Drupal Association, who's in charge of all this stuff, he talked a little bit about it. He talked about the partnership that we have with GitLab, which is amazing. GitLab is actually, you know, I don't even know how many patches or how many changes they've made to the underlying GitLab code so that it works better with Drupal. So basically he talked about how, you know, we want to migrate to GitLab in full, keep the important features. And, you know, they've already created a roadmap. And with the current staffing level, with those 4 folks at the DA, it's going to take about 2 years. So the good news is they have a plan. The GitLab folks are on board. The current staff is on board, but it's going to take 2 years. So this sort of ended up being a call for, we need help. And it was interesting because he wasn't necessarily looking for volunteers, although I'm sure they would take volunteers. They're basically looking to add, you know, 2 full-time developers and a project manager. And they're looking to the community, to basically organizations to sponsor a developer or a project manager at some level. Because the idea is, if they can fill these 3 roles, then they can do this work, you well, I don't know if it's on a slide, but I know he said in about 6 months, which I think is very aggressive regardless, but you know, anything less than 2 years is better. So this was kind of a direct plea to the community, and this is not unheard of. I mean, there are a lot of companies out there, and actually Amy June is a great example of this, who have folks on their payroll, but pay them basically to do work for the community. You know, Acquia is a great example of this. Acquia, you know, I don't even know how many people. It's called the Drupal Acceleration Team. I don't know how many people are on that team now. I suspect 6 to 10, maybe more. But those people aren't necessarily working on Acquia tasks. Their job is to just make Drupal. They work on Drupal core and Drupal modules. And granted, I'm sure that there is some direction from Acquia about, hey, you know, this module would be really helpful. Let's see if there's community support for it and then get it built or something like that. I know one of the most prolific, oops, sorry about my mic. One of the most prolific core contributors, and actually he's a core committer as well, Alex Pott. He works for Chapter 3, I believe, which is a Drupal shop out of San Francisco. And I know for a time he was full-time. Like they basically paid his salary and said, go work on Drupal core full-time. So this is not unheard of. There's a lot of organizations that basically provide time for, you know, their employees to work on community stuff. So I think that's what this is a call for, which would be great. Yeah. So bottom line, he wants to replace, you know, just about all of our development tools with GitLab while migrating into GitLab all the stuff that makes our community special. And I know, you know, for me, that's really the contribution system. Yeah, so this is, I think, just wrapping things up here, right? So he talked about, you know, the DA is going to lead this transition. He's looking for folks to help with this project browser. You know, if we can get to GitLab, we'll get more contributors, and then, you know, current initiatives, and that's it. And that was the Driesnote. Did I miss? I don't think you know, I had the slides here, so I'm pretty sure I didn't miss anything. I mean, if you're interested and you want to watch it, so I'll put this. Actually, I put this in Slack already. But the video, it's that one section I mentioned where he has Matt Grasmack go through the process of contributing code to Drupal is funny, sad, because it took so long. But it's all on YouTube, and you can watch it. And literally, like, this is where I got the slides from as well. All right. So Dries did it in an hour something. I did it in about 35 minutes. But I didn't go into nearly as much detail. All right. I think I'm going to stop the recording because everyone's quiet and nobody has any questions or anything. So I'm going to stop the recording.